So you have 7 minutes starting now.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. We're tackling a big question. Why is the Christian God necessary for knowledge? Now, that might sound like a brain twister, but don't worry. I'm going to keep it simple and fun. We'll talk about stories, movies, a little science, and why I think the Christian God is the key to understanding the world. So let's jump right in. First, what's this debate about? It's about figuring out how we know stuff, how we make sense of reality. Everyone makes sense of reality through what we call a first principle or starting point belief. And when we think about the Christian God, he's not a normal type of fact. The Christian God is an ultimate fact, which means he makes other facts true. So the Christian God would be a starting point through which we interpret reality at a foundational level. What is foundationally ultimate? What is foundational to existence? So when we argue about God, we have to argue about starting points, first principles. And I'm going to say that the Christian God is going to be necessary for knowledge. Not just any God, like some far-off creator who doesn't care, but specifically the Christian God who's personal, involved, and gives us the full picture. My opponent might say we don't need any God, or maybe a hands-off one could work. But I'm here to show why that's not enough. Let's start with something we all get, stories. Ever since we were kids, we love stories, fairy tales, TV shows. Why? Because stories help us figure things out. They take a messy pile of info and turn it into something that makes sense. They give us the who, the what, and the why. Think about your favorite movie. Without the story, it's just random scenes. Stories give us context, and that's how humans naturally understand reality. So, here's the twist. Science is a story, too. You heard me right. Science isn't just a list of facts. It's a tale we tell about how the world works. Gravity makes things fall, the sun powers life, germs make us sick. That's the plot. Scientists build this story with experiments and observation. But here's the catch. Every story comes with what I call metaphysical baggage, which is a fancy way of saying that we all bring our own beliefs to the tables, ideas about what's real and how it all fits together. And those beliefs are going to shape the story we tell, even in science. Take a movie, for example. You walk into a movie halfway through. You plop down, and on the screen there's a woman sneaking through a dark house with a flashlight. Is she a spy? A thief? Maybe she's just looking for a snack. You don't know because you missed the first half. Without that context, the setup, the characters, the stakes, you're lost. You can see what's happening, but you can't interpret what's going on. That's what it's like trying to understand science or anything without the right starting point. Science shows us gravity pulling, cells growing, stars shining, but without the full story, we're stuck guessing why it works that way or if we can even trust what we see. So what's the full story we need? That's where the Christian God comes in. Metaphysics just means big ideas about reality, like why anything exists at all. The Christian version says God made the world with a plan. He didn't just kick it off and leave. He's in it, keeping it going, giving it meaning. The Bible's like the opening credits. It tells us how the movie starts. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So it's not just a fun story, it's a necessary story for knowledge. And here's why. We can trust our brains. If God made us in his image, like the Bible says, our minds are built to understand the world. Our eyes, ears, and thoughts. Without God designing them, why should we believe our senses aren't fooling us? The world stays consistent. Science works because nature follows rules, like sun rising every morning. Christian God promises that consistency. He says in Genesis, while the earth remains, day and night shall not cease. That's why experiments today match those tomorrow. So truth matters. Knowledge needs honesty. Scientists can fake their results. So the Christian God sets up a right and wrong, like don't lie, to keep us accountable. Without that, why bother with truth at all? So, with Christian metaphysics, we get the whole movie, not just the middle. It's the context that makes science and knowledge work. So, here's the bottom line knowledge isn't just facts, it's understanding the story behind them. Science tells us how stuff happens, but the Christian God tells us why and why we can trust it. Without Him, we're like that late moviegoer fumbling in the dark. So, as we debate tonight, ask yourself, what makes sense? A world with a God who's involved and gives us the full picture, or one where we're guessing at half the story? I say the Christian God is the only way knowledge holds together. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait to dig into this with you all.
Thank you, PMARS. And are you ceding the rest of your time?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Modern Atheism, it's your introduction now. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 7-minute timer.
I'm ready.
You have 7 minutes starting now.
Okay, so the question is the Christian God necessary for knowledge? The question takes place within a context, which is an argument for the existence of God. The argument goes as follows. Premise number 1, the Christian God is necessary for knowledge.
Flip that around.
Really? Premise number 2, humans have knowledge. Premise number 3, conclusion, therefore God exists. And while atheists usually attack premise number 1, the premise number 2 is seen as obvious, like it's obvious we have knowledge, right? But hold on, there is a trick. The trick is how exactly do you define knowledge? And the key question is, does knowledge have to be infallible in order to be considered knowledge? Like, we need to know something 100% true or 100% certain to be true for this to be considered knowledge? And I will say the answer is no. Let me explain. If somebody asks you, hey, do you know where your wife works? The normal answer is, yes, of course I know where my wife works, right? She works at Walmart, for example. But you don't know that 100%. You don't know that she didn't get fired today, or that Walmart didn't just go bankrupt, right? But you still say you know where your wife works, right? The point I'm making is that in the normal language, the way we regularly use the word knowledge, we don't need 100% certainty or infallibility for this to be considered knowledge. And what presups sometimes do is that they make a distinction between infallible knowledge and justified true belief. And I'm like, okay, if you want to redefine knowledge this way, it's fine, but then premise number 2, that humans have knowledge, is no longer that obvious, because now I could dispute it. I could say, okay, do humans really have knowledge, or do we simply have justified true belief? So how do humans acquire knowledge? I would say we get knowledge from our senses. We use our senses to perceive reality. Through observation, we acquire information about the nature of reality. Now, the question is, how do you know your senses are reliable, right? That's what presups will ask. I will say that we can verify this. Look at this pen. My sense of sight gives me information about the location of this pen. And if I reach to grab it, I know I am touching the pen. Now, my sense of touch is telling me that the location of the pen is there, is confirming the same thing. Now, here's the interesting part, because they could say, okay, but how do you know that your sense of touch is reliable, right? Like maybe all of your senses are wrong, and maybe your sense of sight and your sense of touch they're both reliable, right? But here's the thing. For both my sense of sight and my sense of touch to be wrong regarding the location of the pen, they will not only have to be wrong, they have to be wrong in a way that match. And this is too weird. You know, like, are you telling me that your sense of sight is unreliable and is giving unreliable information, and your sense of touch is doing the same, but they like perfectly match? This seems too weird. The only way for this to happen is for me to be trapped in like some kind of illusion, like in the Matrix, or for me to be dreaming, for example. So the question is, okay, how do you know that you're not dreaming? Or how do you know you're not in the matrix, right? The answer is we cannot know this for sure. But this is a problem both for atheism and for theism also. So, and one last point. I will say Christianity has certain elements that act as defeaters for knowledge and make it impossible to justify it knowledge in an infallible way. One of these defeaters is the devil. The devil is known as the great deceiver. Revelation chapter 12, verse 9 speaks of Satan, who is the great deceiver who deceives the world. So if the devil exists and he's the great deceiver, how do you know that you're not being deceived by the devil on something? Or how do you know that you're not being attacked by a demon in a way that is making your senses unreliable, right? You cannot know that. And Christianity, because their worldview includes these things, then it cannot provide a justification for knowledge. And a third element is the fall of man. Christianity says that Adam and Eve were created perfectly with perfect bodies and presumably also perfectly reliable senses. But after they sinned, after the fall, they became corrupt and they became fallible. So how do you know that you're not so fallen that your reasoning faculties are unreliable or your senses? You cannot know that, right? Because humanity inherited this fallen nature. So I will say that Christianity also is self-defeating when it comes to providing a epistemological basis for infallible knowledge. And that's it for my opening.
Cool. So you're ceding the rest of your time?
Yeah.
Perfect. So we'll be moving into the cross exams initially. This is once again going to be 2 batches of cross exams each. So this is going to be PMARS and then Modern Atheism and then PMARS and Modern Atheism. And then we'll move into the open discussion after that. These are going to be 7 minutes each. PMARS, let me know when you're ready and I'll start your timer for your first cross exam.
Okay, how much time do I have?
You'll have 7 minutes for the first one and 7 for the second.
Okay, I'm ready, I guess.
Perfect. I'm starting your timer now.
Okay, so in your opening, you tried to challenge premise 2 of that, like, humans have knowledge?
Not exactly. I'm not saying humans don't have knowledge. I'm saying if you define knowledge as that it has to be infallible, yes, I will challenge that notion. Maybe humans don't have knowledge.
Well, it kind of depends. Okay, so would you say that all knowledge is fallible?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. If I say all knowledge is fallible, is that fallible or infallible? You know, that will be also fallible. I think that statement will self-defeat.
Yeah, because, like, wouldn't you say there's certain things we couldn't be fallible about, like maybe math or logic?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I'm not sure, because how do you know that you got math right? Again, once the axioms of math are in place, then math follows. But how do you know that you got them right? I'm not sure. I don't even know. That you are 6, maybe you know infallibly that you are 6. I think therefore I am. Maybe I don't. Maybe that's something you know infallible.
Would you say, like, if we're wrong about logic, the truth of logic, wouldn't that sort of make it impossible to say anything is true? So that would be kind of a devastating. We couldn't be wrong about logic, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think if not all the knowledge that we have has been deduced using the 3 laws of logic. I think if I look at this pen, I see the pen is black. It doesn't matter. I didn't use the laws of logic ever to come to this conclusion. It was pure observation. So I'm not sure. I don't think nothing happens. I'm not sure what happens if the laws of logic are wrong.
Well, wouldn't you say that for knowledge or logic, they kind of go hand in hand, wouldn't you agree that there would have to be some logical consistency?
I'm not sure. No, I think I think if things are inconsistent, you will have the knowledge that things are inconsistent. So that you will still have some form of knowledge.
But in a world where everything were random, any knowledge claim you make, wouldn't it would be subject to change like immediately, or even like as you're making the claim could change because there would be no reason to think anything was consistent.
Well, you will have the knowledge that everything is random. That will be a knowledge that one will have in that world.
I think that would be questionable even though, because for you, all you know, things could just like start being consistent out of nowhere for no explicable reason. I don't think you can make any claim in that type of world. So you think we can have knowledge even without logical consistency?
I'm not sure what you're asking. What do you mean by logical consistency?
That like math will be the same on Earth, on Mars. Math is the same in the past and the future. Like there's certain things that hold true consistently.
Yeah, I think
everywhere.
math. Yeah, I think math has to be the same like everywhere. I don't think it's possible that it changes.
Right, but to have like logical consistency, wouldn't we need? Like, why would logic be consistent unless there was something like the Christian God, which would like ensure logical consistency through His plan?
I don't see why we need the Christian God to make logic consistent.
Well, because if you're for logic to be consistent, we have to reason from an absolute, and I'm arguing that I'm reasoning from the absolute of the mind of the Christian God, and I would feel like if you're denying that, you're making a counterclaim. Like, what absolute would you be reasoning from in order to have logical consistency?
How about the universe? Can the universe act as our? Oh, I'm not supposed to ask anything here. Sorry. Yeah, I don't.
Well, the universe. That's what a lot of people say, but I mean, I don't really think that's an answer. But because like, for one, would you agree that the universe is an abstraction?
The universe. No, I think the universe is like the sum of all things, of all the planets of the galaxies. That's what we call the universe and the space.
Right. I'm thinking how to explain this. But okay, so like, what would be like absolute and consistent in the universe to explain that like logic is absolute and consistent?
We could define the axioms of logic, and this will be truths that will be accepted as self-evident. We don't need for any additional justification.
We just invent logic?
1 minute, PMARS?
No, because we did.
Okay. But if we just invent logic, then logic would become like what if would we be able to travel through the city safely if people just invented traffic rules? If people just invented like, oh, I can go through a red light. I mean, could the city function if people just invent their own rules?
Well,
so why would you think like logic could function if people can just invent their own rules?
If we invented three different laws of logic, then it wouldn't work. It wouldn't serve its purpose of reaching to the conclusions, and we will be able to verify it. Do the conclusions that we reach using these other invented laws of logic, are they true? And if they're not true, we will notice.
Well, again, to notice, you're saying they're true because they work, but that's going to assume a normative framework. Like
that is time.
Okay.
Modern Atheism, let me know when you're ready and we'll begin your first set of cross exams.
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Perfect. You have 7 minutes starting now.
Okay. So, Pimas, how do you know that your reasoning faculties are reliable?
No, my reasoning faculties are reliable because I'm made in the image of God, and God, we can guarantee that my faculties are reliable.
Okay, and how do you know that they are made in the image of God?
No, they're made in the image of God because that's revealed in special revelation in the Bible.
Okay, how do you know that God is not lying to you in Revelation?
I know that God's not lying to me because he reveals that he always tells the truth.
But a liar will say that he always tells the truth. A liar could say that, you know?
Okay. Well, it would also be a logical contradiction because God sets the standard for what's true. So it would be a contradiction if like the standard for truth lies.
Oh,
So it's
what
also
you did,
logical.
okay, what you just did right there is a form of reasoning. But remember, the question is, how do you know your reasoning is reliable? So you cannot use reasoning in the answer, you know, because how do you know that this reasoning you just made, that argument, is good? If you have to know that your reasoning faculties are good in order to make even an argument.
Yeah, I think that's going to be necessary. That we're going to have to use our reasoning faculties to examine our reasoning faculties. I don't see another way around it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, me too. I don't think atheists have any way around it either. You know, it's very hard. It's impossible.
But I don't see why that's a problem because it doesn't change the fact that like God reveals that we're made in his image and that he would ensure that he intended, because the whole idea is that the intention and the purpose and the design behind my senses. If my senses are intended for the world's intended for my senses, that makes sense that they align together. But if they're not intended for each other, then how would you explain that you can sense the world accurately? I can't ask questions, sorry. That's rhetorical.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, okay. Sure, I don't know. Okay. How do you know that the devil is not deceiving you?
Because that would be like a self-defeating worldview. If revelation isn't true, then nothing would be true. It'd be like an impossibility of the contrary.
Okay, I don't know. I don't see why, but it's not deceiving you about like something like about mundane things. Do you know that the devil is not deceiving you about some things during your life, for example? Can you know that?
I mean, I'm fallible, right? So people can be mistaken. That's what you're asking. Yeah, I can be mistaken, of course. Only God's word is infallible.
Sure.
And like, yeah.
Well, what I'm getting at is that it is self-defeating in the same way that theists sometimes claim that atheism is self-defeating. Like sometimes theists says that, well, how do you know your reason is correct? Because if they evolved to find survival instead of truth, then maybe your conclusions are not truth. So it's self-defeating, right? But what you just say is the same, you know, it's self-defeating. It will be self-defeating, but so what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't think we have that problem because like the source of truth reveals knowledge to us. Like that's the whole idea. So if the source of truth is lying, then that makes knowledge impossible. So it's like a self-defeating position. If you're trying to the model of reality where God lies doesn't defeat the model of reality where God always tells the truth. Because in the model of reality where God lies, like that makes knowledge impossible. So that it's like a self-defeating position.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Christianity is if God is a liar, then you make knowledge impossible. That's what I'm saying.
But that's a straw man of the position because our position is God always tells the truth.
Yeah, but if he had been a liar, you wouldn't know that, right? How do you know that?
We know it because of the impossibility of the contrary. Like if the Bible's not true, then nothing's true. But something has to be true because like we do science, we do philosophy, so there has to be truth.
Some things will be true, but it's just that you will know that you will know them because God is lying to you.
No, nothing would. It would destroy truth. If the source of truth lies to us, that means truth would be impossible because God would be the source of truth. That's what I'm saying. Like that model of reality is self-defeat. So that's not a defeater for Christianity because it doesn't make the whole point of the transcendental challenge is your model has to make truth possible or knowledge possible.
That assumes that knowledge is possible for humans, but you don't know that, like for sure.
Well, we do, because to say knowledge is there is no knowledge, or to deny knowledge would be a contradiction, because that's a knowledge claim.
Right.
So there, that's why it's like an anti-skeptical argument. The idea is you can't be skeptical about the possibility of knowledge. Knowledge has to be possible. Our senses have to be reliable. There's no other way, because it's self-defeating to say otherwise.
Right. Okay, let's talk about math. Do you think God can make a universe where 1 + 1 = 5?
1 minute modern?
No.
So I think that what this implies is that math answers to a reality external, and it's not what God says.
Math is external to God?
It answers, in a way, is an object. It answers an external framework of reality that is not what God decides it to be, because God cannot make 1 + 1 = 5. This is objectively true in a way. It's like independent of God. Let's not say external. Let's say independent of God.
That's what I would argue, that the attributes of math can only be explained by God. So math would be like a reflection of the mind of God. And without God's mind, we wouldn't have math. So I'd actually use that to prove God.
How is math a reflection?
Because
reflection. Okay.
That is
mathematical
time. However, you can continue your response if you'd like.
Because mathematical truths have attributes, like people think mathematical truths are absolute, universal, eternal, necessary, and those are attributes we associate with like God and the divine. So they indicate only could be grounded by God.
Okay.
And PMARS, let me know when you're ready, and we'll begin your second cross-exam here. You'll have another 7 minutes.
Okay. I'm ready.
Starting your timer now. You have 7 minutes.
Okay. I'm not sure. So I know you did argue sort of for like empiricism. So are you aware that empiricism is famous for like it's the critique that empiricism cannot improve empiricism? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I think cannot prove empiricism. Well, no, I'm not super aware of that, but I agree that you cannot prove empiricism to be true. Like if you mean proof, like 100% proof,
And you said we don't have to be 100% certain for knowledge. I would agree with that. But to even talk about, so would you say that knowledge is probabilistic?
I would say a lot of the knowledge we humans have, yes.
Would you agree for probabilities require background information? Like we need variables like a static and dynamic variable. Would you agree to that?
Well, honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know. I cannot.
Okay. You said that we can't know that you conceded that we can't know we are in the matrix. But you said that I have that problem as well. Wouldn't it be true though that if the source of truth, God, reveals certain knowledge, sort of like, wouldn't that be sort of like the red pill to get out of the matrix and into reality? If ultimate reality itself gave you knowledge, or how do you see that as having the same problem?
Yeah, but that's just assuming your worldview is true and saying, oh, that's not the matrix. But I could do the same. I could say, well, if naturalism is true, we are evolved organisms and we are not in the matrix, right? But that's not how you defeat the matrix, right? That's like kind of missing the point, I think.
But wouldn't it logically follow that knowledge from God would be a type of red pill, whereas like knowledge from science or logic doesn't get Neo out of the matrix? Because doesn't he already have that Doesn't he already know about evolution, but he's still in the Matrix?
Sorry, I'm not sure I followed that. Like, but what if the Matrix includes the whole God revelation thing as a part of the illusion? You know?
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. But yeah, in the movie, obviously, like Christianity is not true within that world, but that's not the actual reality. It's more like an analogy about how humans are limited. So let's see. We talked about Descartes' demons. Okay, you talked about how sin makes man fallible, so that would be like a defeater for Christian knowledge in the Christian worldview. I'm agreeing with that. I would agree with that, but does it follow that because man is fallible, that therefore the word of God is fallible?
But what do you use to read the word of God? You're using your eyes, which are your senses, which are fallible.
True. So in naturalism, we evolve senses, but isn't it true that different animals evolve different sense data?
Yes.
So, for example, bats and dolphins have sonar and humans don't. So some animals have sense data that humans don't, correct?
Yes.
And wouldn't it also be true that for all we know, there could be tons of the physical world. There could be like 90% of the physical world. You just didn't evolve the sense data to have knowledge of that, and that we're living in only maybe 10% of reality.
Yeah, that's an interesting position. Maybe yes. I guess yeah.
I think. Wouldn't you think that's make it impossible for there to be knowledge on a naturalistic model of reality?
Yes, but if that 90% of the world does not interact with our senses at all, then I think like it doesn't matter. You know, what's the point? If 10% is only 10% is going to interact with you, then you need knowledge about that 10%, not about the 90% that is never going to possibly interact with you.
Also, different animals evolve different sense data. Like flies have compound eyes, so they see the world totally different than humans see the world. Would there be any way to tell on a naturalistic model, like who evolved the correct sense data?
Oh no, that's very interesting. I was thinking about that thing when I preparing this. Like, no, I do like, for example, dogs see the world in gray. Can we say we see them better? Some birds see other colors. Can we say like how is the real world? I don't know. What's the real color? Is there such a thing as that, or is color like purely subjective? I'm not sure. I don't know.
So, don't you see that there's a difference when like our senses and our minds are designed for the world or intended for the world, as opposed to like in a world where there's no guiding force that would intend your senses to reflect the world correctly? You don't see like how there's a difference in those models?
45 seconds, P-Mars. Didn't want to interrupt you there.
I will say that there is a guiding force, and this survival. All things being equal, accurately perceiving the world is going to be advantageous for survival. So there is a guiding force in making our senses reliable.
Okay, I'll just, if we're near the end, I can just end there.
All right, so you're seating your time?
Yeah, I'll seat my time.
Gotcha. Let me know when you're ready, Modern, and we'll get your second batch of cross-exam up. Or timer up.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect.
I'm ready.
Perfect. You have
Okay.
7 minutes starting now.
Okay, so maybe in this second portion, we could explore why exactly the Christian God as opposed to another worldview. So I think there is atheism, there is polytheism, there is Deism, you know, there is like, you know, so why why Christianity is my question. How do you justify that, specifically Christianity?
I think that Well, for one, revelation is going to be important. I think that's key. So, ultimate reality, the only way to know it is it has to take the initiative to reveal itself to us. And revelation would leave us with like Islam, Judaism, Christianity. And so from there it would be like a theological debate, and where we could argue that only the Bible, the Christian Bible, has the revealed God with the perfect attribute set, and that attribute set, like it's triune, absolute, personal, always truth revealing, stuff like that. That attribute set is necessary precondition. So like the Jewish God isn't triune, or like Allah, he lies, and so those models wouldn't be the preconditions for intelligibility, knowledge, truth.
Okay, can you please tell why does God have to be triune?
There's a problem in philosophy of the one and the many. So basically, for knowledge to be possible, there has to be connections between objects. Like you and me both have the same property. We're humans. That's a connection that has to be real. And then there has to be just differences. Like we have a different age, height, whatever. We have. So for knowledge to be possible, there has to be differences, real differences, and real connections between objects. And if ultimately reality is just like one thing, like in Hinduism, that means distinctions are an illusion. And like some people, that's where you get sort of the matrix worldview. And if ultimate reality is many things, then connections would be an illusion, and then knowledge would be impossible because we couldn't like put anything a category or analyze any experience. So we need an ultimate reality that has one and many. That's what we have in the Trinity.
But it's the problem of one and the many, not one and the three. So I think any number will work, not just the Trinity. 2 will have worked, 2 persons, 4 persons, 5 persons will have worked because it's one and many. It's not just 3, not specifically Trinity.
Well, I think it needs to be 3 because I think if it was 4, it wouldn't be personal. The personhood of God would get lost in the group dynamic. And if it was just 2, it wouldn't be fully relational. So you wouldn't have like a first, second, and third person perspective. So to be like fully relational and fully personal and have the perfect attribute set, it would need to be 3.
Why does the person of God gets lost if there are 4 persons? I don't see
because
why.
God has to be like fully self-aware of himself, and if there's like more than 3 persons, then it becomes like a group dynamic where God wouldn't be fully self-aware, and that would be like an imperfection, and God's supposed to be perfect.
I think, but I don't just 3 seems like a group dynamic to me already. I don't see how 3 is not a group dynamic,
Because God can know. I don't know how to explain it really well, I guess. Yeah, I'm kind of lost. I don't know how to really explain it better than that.
Yeah. Okay, it's complicated maybe. Yeah, okay, sure. And yeah, okay. Let's go back maybe to days to revelate. Is revelation necessary? What
Yeah.
I say, a deist God could make humans with reliable faculties and could make objective reality, right? So you could get knowledge just from that. Why do we need revelation?
Well, the problem with the deist God is
The last part.
my bad.
From,
My bad.
From the deist. None of
All
the
right.
deist God.
All right, I'm resuming the timer.
Okay, so like the deist God could create the world, like it might work initially, like the car, you might buy a car and it works at first, but it could break down, and because the deist God isn't active in the world, he can't ensure that like things will keep working and be consistent. So we need like the Christian God who's both transcendent and immanent in the world to like he's the mechanic that's always around to fix the car. So that would be like the problem with deism. And also the morality thing. God has to reveal morality because morality is also tied to knowledge. Okay. So the deist God knowledge would be morally unmoored. So there'd be no reason to be like seek the truth or care about the truth.
No, there will be morality, but he just didn't reveal it explicitly to humans. But do you think the Christian God is actively making your car not break down, like in an active way?
Yes, he actively ensures that like there'll be consistency physically and like conceptually.
1 minute, Modern.
Sure. I actually watched one of your videos to prepare for this, and you were talking about the uniformity of nature. You said that only the Christian God can explain the uniformity of nature, why the future resembles the past, because he's making the universe like that consistent and making the future resemble the past. But I think if the universe was not consistent, it was just like changing always, I think you will be saying the same thing. You will be saying, oh, only God can account for this because only God can change it. Since things don't change alone, God is changing them. So it seems to me that no matter what situation, you will always say God is accounting for it. So it's like you always win, I think. What would you say to this?
Well, no, because I'm basing it on what the Bible says, and that was like written thousands of years ago. So it's not like I just made it up or something. So like what the Bible reveals
That
is
is
consistent.
time. You're welcome to continue or stop, though. Or I mean, finish your statement or stop.
So it's kind of just like when we think about the things that are necessary for the uniformity of nature, it's going to be like consistent with the attributes of the God or the entity in the Bible. So it's pretty remarkable, quinky dink, I would say.
All right. Thank you for the great cross exams, guys. We're getting ready to move into the open discussion. This is going to be a 30-minute open discussion. Let's try to be considerate of each other's time here. Now, it's going to be a back and forth between the two of you. I don't plan on jumping in unless I have to, right? But let me know when y'all are both ready, and we'll start the 30-minute timer here.
I'm ready.
ready.
Perfect. You guys have 30 minutes starting now.
So I don't know, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking what do I want to talk about? Let's say, I think there is the most interesting part of the tag argument philosophically, and I think the strongest point is the one of the laws of logic. Seems to me like, okay, how do you justify the laws of logic? I think it's very interesting. Oh, here's my comment. Let me make a challenge to the thing. When atheists ask the theist, why can't God make a stone so heavy that he can lift it? What the Christian says is, oh, because this will be a logical contradiction, right? And he cannot do it. So what he's saying is that God omnipotence is limited by the laws of logic in a way. It's like the laws of no contradiction, it also governs like God.
Well, we would say that logic is a reflection of the mind of God. So it's like, logic is correct thinking about the world, and God's mind correctly thinks about the world. So, God couldn't do illogical things because it's like his nature. It's not that logic doesn't limit him. He's the thing that limits logic, and he's like the source of logic.
But if he wanted to, could he do things that are illogical, a contradiction, a stone so heavy that he can lift it? If he wanted.
No. Because
why not?
Because he limits like himself. I don't know like a good way to put it.
But he can, if he limits himself, he can set those limits if he wanted, like hypothetically. So he could make a thing be not identical to itself somehow.
No, because he can't contradict his nature. So he's like already defined his nature, and then that's it. Like, so that's because it's like his nature is unchanging and he's eternal, uncreated.
A reflection of God's mind governs what he can do.
Well, his mind is unchanging. Logic is a reflection of his mind, so that's why logic doesn't change. Because if logic could change, we couldn't even have a debate. because we need there to be consistency to logic, and that's why we would say that like logic proves God, because you're going to need like the transcendental mind of God to like a necessary mind to have the necessary truths, because logic is like necessary truths, so they require a
Yeah,
necessary mind.
I agree with the last part. Logic are necessary truths. Let me give you an account for logic, if I may. Kant speaks of truths that are a priori truths. These are truths used by virtue of the definition of words. He makes the example, a square is a polygon. This is true just by the definition of a square and a polygon. That's it. In the same way, I think the law of identity, and thing is identical to itself. I think this is a trivial truth that comes directly from the definition of identical, and it doesn't need any grounding in anything. It's just obvious that a thing is identical to itself, you know?
Well, but if an object, or well, I always use the example of an apple. If there's nothing limiting the apple's states of existence, or there's nothing limiting the apple's properties, the apple could just like randomly change constantly. So that's why we need like there's rules. We see, when we look at the world, we see both logical rules and we see physical rules like gravity, and these rules need something to impose and enforce the rules, and that's like exactly what the Christian God does. And I don't see like how you would explain it any other way.
I will say, for example, gravity is just the law of gravity itself. It's just a linguistic proposition describing a property that mass attracts itself. It's simply a description of this property. It's not that gravity, there is a law of gravity abstract that is making matter attract itself. I think there is an intrinsic property of matter, its intrinsic nature, like it curves space and it makes it attract other mass. That's a property intrinsic of the matter, I think.
Right, but the thing is, like, it applies to everything on the Earth is affected by gravity, and so you need something to explain how something can like be consistent like that. That's a type of like consistency or like a pattern. And then so like God.
The explanation is that different things are all made of mass. Mass is ultimately at the deepest level is the same quarks. It's just on a different arrangement, but it's the same quark. Yeah. It has the same intrinsic properties.
Yeah, but I'd be asking like, why does it consistently like? Why is gravity gonna be true tomorrow? Like that's the consistency. Okay. And so God explains the why. Science tells us the how, but science doesn't tell us the why. That's where we need God and His revelation.
Okay.
Science relies on that. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, no problem. I will say that, for example, the law of gravity, we already see for a certain phenomena, which are the factors affecting the phenomena. In gravity, the factors are the mass and the distance. Time is not a factor, because we already know that time is not a factor, then it's not going to change tomorrow.
I mean, we don't know that. That's a big problem, and because that's science just assumes that's called the principle of like regularity of nature, and science just assumes that's true. Science can't prove it. That's why I argue we need God to reveal that tomorrow will be like today or the past, because that we need that truth to do science, and then we get that truth in the Bible.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You say we don't know if time is a factor. Well, it doesn't seem to be. We have observed the phenomena a lot and extensively, and it just doesn't seem to change over time at all. So why? So this it becomes like the default, the natural state of it.
Right, but that doesn't get you to like it doesn't give you any there's nothing that ensures or guarantees it will be true though. Like it could just stop being true tomorrow, and then science could stop working. Like for all we know. So like God guarantees it's true.
Right. And I think. Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just think it's kind of like you're being inconsistent because, like, on the one hand, you're saying, like, look, we look at the world and we see these rules, so we just describe the rules, but you're not explaining, like, why are there rules? Why? I mean, why isn't everything just random? So it isn't. It's kind of like you're not. God's really obvious and it's right there, and you're not. I don't know, seeing it. I guess, and I think it's because of a bias. And that's what we're like we're trying to address, like your bias.
Sure. I mean, what does a random universe mean? Like, okay, the universe is not random. How would a random universe be like?
Well, yeah. So the universe is either going to be intentional or non-intentional. So there's either going to be like a guiding force, connecting everything together, or everything's just kind of like there's no rhyme or reason why anything would connect. And that's what God does. God explains the connection between, because it's when we look at the world, we see connections everywhere. Like, you know, the cycle of life, and like we breathe out oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide, and then there's this whole life cycle where everything's the bees and the flowers and everything's interconnected. And so we have this universe where there's all these interconnected truths. And so we need something, like, it makes more sense if there's intention and purpose and something guiding all these like things to be connected to each other. And the universe where nothing's guiding the connections, it's like it doesn't make sense when we see all these patterns and unity in the world, and there's nothing to make unity real.
Okay. So maybe maybe a random universe will be like without all these patterns and so on, right?
Yeah, I think like the atheist model or like the non-God model, it would just be like random, and you couldn't have knowledge in that model.
Okay. Can we say? Do you think that a supernova exploding like a gas is it like random, like chaotic, random, or not? Or is it also order?
Random as in like there's no intention behind or purpose behind things. Things just kind of happen.
Just under 20 minutes, guys.
States of affairs would just kind of happen with there's no rhyme or reason. There's no context. Because God is like the ultimate why to everything. He explains why everything happens. And so when you remove God, now there's no why. There's no answer to the why. And it's just things happen. Who knows why?
Sure. Okay. What about this hypothesis? What if I explain the uniformity of nature in terms of an anthropic principle in this way? If the universe had not been consistent, it had been random or chaotic, then life wouldn't have appeared. Life appeared because the universe is consistent. So we see a universe that is consistent because it's the only one that will produce life. How about something like this?
Well, I mean, we agree that there's consistency, but then it's like, why is there consistency? And that's not really answering the question. It's just saying like there's evidence of the consistency, and that there's life. And I agree, but I think it doesn't explain the why. There's no empirical evidence for the uniformity of nature, and there's no rational evidence for the uniformity of nature, and there never will be. It's something we can't know because of human limitations. And that's why I argue, like, because humans are limited, we have to kind of accept help from God to know things and do science and do philosophy. So that's why I say we have to use revelation to even do the science or do the philosophy. Like, stand on it as a foundation.
Sure. Okay. When you say that there is no explanation or consistency, right? I think there is an assumption there that change or chaos is the default state, and consistency is the thing that needs an explanation. And I think the opposite could be said as true. I could say that if I had like chaos and change, some things like changing or appearing for no reason, I will need an explanation for that. Like a consistent universe needs one explanation. Okay, why is the thing there? But a universe that changes it needs two explanations. It needs to explain why the initial sin and why the change. So in a way, I think an inconsistent change in the universe is even more requiring of an explanation than a consistent one. So you cannot say like, oh, you cannot explain why this is consistent, right? Whatever it is, you're gonna say that this was unexplainable.
Well, no. I just think I think we're in a situation where like, because it's a question of what is ultimate reality, because that's essentially what God is, and you're either gonna have a system where like ultimate reality reveals itself and we can know it, or we can't know ultimate reality, and then we would have like brute facts. But the problem with brute facts is, who's to say like what brute facts we accept and what brute facts we reject? So that ends up being kind of like arbitrary. So there's no way to like make sense of reality, make sense of knowledge in the world if we have a system of brute facts. That we need an ultimate foundation in the Christian God, or else we don't have the preconditions for knowledge.
Okay, is God not a brute fact?
No, God would ground himself, or he would explain himself.
Why can't the universe explain itself?
Because the universe doesn't have a mind, and it's also abstract. So
The universe is abstract.
yeah, the universe would be like a set of everything that's real in all the material things, or something like that.
Yeah.
So sets are abstract; they're not real, concrete things. So like,
Yeah.
you need something like to like ground. I don't know how to explain it. Like, if we talk about a bunch of people in a parade are holding up a float, you would say the crowd holds up the float, but the crowd isn't real. The crowd is like a group, a set. But then there's real people that are holding up the float. So the crowd isn't really holding up the float, although we say that. But it's actually the people that are holding up the float. So sets like don't stand in causal relations to reality, or abstractions don't. So the universe couldn't like explain itself because it's causally effete. It doesn't cause anything.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure I can follow that. Do you think that the group of these two pens, and the moment one pen was a concrete thing, but the moment I got a second pen, then it became an abstract thing, the group. Like this is now not concrete, physical, but abstract because it's a group.
Yeah, pens. Yeah.
I mean, the group itself is just the name we give to the both pens together. I don't know. I don't see why how do you get to the universe is a group, therefore the universe is abstract. I'm not sure I can follow that really.
Because I don't know. That's just what it means to be a set. I don't know. I don't know. It's just like definitionally true.
Okay. I'm not sure group is an abstract thing. This abstract is like different things. I don't know. Concept. I mean, I'm not sure a number, for example. I'm not sure a group of tangible things is. I'm not sure group is an abstract. You know, like the word group is abstract, but a group is not abstract. You know.
Yeah, like the crowd is an abstraction, but it contains real things. The crowds don't exist.
They do. It's the name we give the name crowd to the to the well, we see the group of people, the group of people, you know. We give it the name crowd.
Right. But
it's
not tangible. No, it contains, within the group there are tangible things, but the group itself is not tangible. Groups aren't tangible.
Oh. Okay.
The categories of things are not physical things.
Okay.
So like
I'm not
we need something that's like actual and real. The universe isn't like a real thing. It's like a concept.
right.
That
Is this pen a real thing?
is what?
Is this pen a real thing?
Yes.
It's a group of molecules. It's a group of plastic molecules, actually. They're rearranged in the form of
Yeah.
a pen. How is it real then? How is it a real thing instead of an abstract thing?
Yeah, well then that's I don't know how to explain that. So then that's yeah, I don't know. There's a word I can't think of the word. What is it? I can't think of the word. I'm not that good with language.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
But
Yeah,
I know
it's complicated. Okay.
I know that sets are abstractions. Like I know that the universe would be technically abstract. And that's the problem is like God's not abstract, God's like a real actual thing. And so when we're talking about like grounding something, there has to be a causal relationship. And so this is what like Van Til will say that like people will do is that they try to absolutize statements of abstractions to get out to dismiss the Christian God. But it doesn't you can't like the universe can't be absolute because it's not concrete. It's like it's going to depend on the ultimate.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure
Like
I agree with the universe being abstract, instead of concrete. I don't think any philosopher will say, yeah, the universe is an abstract thing instead of a concrete thing. I'm not okay, but yeah, sure.
um yeah, so like the problem is like when we say anything, when we talk about something that exists, we're also making it a statement about knowledge, we're making a statement about ethics. Or when we talk about so existence, truth, and values, they're all interrelated and interconnected. That where we get
Just under 10 minutes?
so we need to have unity in our worldview. We need the source of everything in existence, the source of truth, and the source of value all have to come from the same thing to have unity. So that would be God. He's creates everything in existence. He's the source of truth, and he's the source of value. And without that, couldn't make sense of anything because those three things are interconnected. Like, say, your neighbor's dog is missing. Okay, so your neighbor's dog. If your neighbor's dog doesn't like exist, then there's no reason to like find out if it's missing, and there are ethics to take because he doesn't exist. If you can't know where your neighbor's dog is, if it's impossible to have knowledge of the dog or if he's missing, and it doesn't matter if he exists, and ethics don't matter because you don't even know what's going on, so there'd be no like right or wrong thing to do. And then if there's no ethics, you might know the dog's missing, you might know the dog exists, but because there's no ethics, there's no reason to like care. There's no reason to do anything. There's no reason to find out if the dog's missing or not. And so all these things are like interrelated and interconnected. Once you change ethics, it affects existence and truth. If you change truth, it affects existence and ethics. And so they need a source for unity. And that's like what we have in the Christian model of reality. And that's why the Christian metaphysics is going to be necessary precondition for knowledge. Because knowledge has to be unified with existence and ethics. And that's the only way to do that is in the Christian model.
Okay, I'm not sure I see why ethics are like really necessary here, because I mean, if I don't have ethics, I don't have a reason to find the dog, right? But my neighbor does. He wants to find the dog because he loves the dog, right? I may not have a reason, but my neighbor does. So for my neighbor, there is a reason,
But like without ethics, if you make an argument, I could just be like, well, why should I even believe your argument? Because if there's no reason to believe things that are true, then truth doesn't matter. Knowledge doesn't matter. Scientists could just lie to make money, and who cares? Because it's not wrong. We can't. Reality is not going to function without ethics. We couldn't have knowledge and truth. Truth and knowledge, truth and value is like they're linked. You can't have one without the other.
Okay, right. I mean, yeah, you spoke in your opening post statement about scientists faking results, but I think for their own knowledge, if they fake results, it makes no sense. You know, they will be getting false results. So it is in their own self-interest to be ethical and not fake results, and there is a pragmatic necessity to it.
Well, Sabine Hassenpfeffer argues that particle physicists are just inventing particles that don't exist to get funding from taxpayers. So I think when there's like a monetary incentive, I mean, corrupt things can happen, and that's why we need like ethics. And if those scientists were Christian, they wouldn't be doing that stuff. You can't just trust scientists to do the right thing. Einstein married his first cousin, and he physically abused her. So he's like the smartest scientist ever, and he couldn't even figure out that a man shouldn't lay his hands on a woman. So if science really fails to explain, like, you know, it gives us data, but should I believe the data? Science can even tell me that I should believe the data. It can't tell me what's right and wrong.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if there are no ethics, then I shouldn't believe other scientists because they could be just lying to me, right? To get money or something, right?
Yep.
Okay, sure, but they could, if they are unethical or immoral, it doesn't matter whether ethics exist or not. They could decide to be immoral despite ethics existing. And if they are, you say that if they're Christian, they will never do it. I mean, are you saying that Christians are never unethical? No Christians are unethical ever?
It's not that Christians are perfect. I wouldn't argue that, obviously, but that at least the Christian worldview would provide a model to make sense of like why we shouldn't lie. Whereas like science can't tell us that, or naturalism can't tell us that. And I think that's like important for knowledge, and that's one of the reasons why the Christian worldview is going to be necessary for knowledge, because truth is a value. It's not just a fact.
Sure. But I think, okay, I think society could provide a justification for why you should be ethical by punishing crime when they do it, right? So we as society can make this justification for ethics by doing crime and punishment.
Yes, but we wouldn't have like an objective standard. So I think it's important to have like an objective standard. Yeah, sure, we can invent laws and standards, but ultimately they're going to be like arbitrary. And Christianity provides in Christianity it makes ethics real. Like when I say Ted Bundy is evil, it's not just a pretend fantasy evil. He's like, God actually makes him evil in reality. He makes his actions actually evil. And it just seems like weird to live in this world where we're going to be like, oh, ethics are like a fantasy, because that's going to ultimately reduce truth to a fantasy, since the truth and ethics are tied together.
I'm not sure we have time because this is a big topic, but how would you answer the Euthyphro dilemma? Like, if does God like something because that something is good, then that what is good is independent of God, or is something good because God likes it, and then what is good is arbitrary? You know.
Yeah, I think there's like a third option where we could say that it's good because God commands it, but it's not arbitrary because his commands are based on his unchanging nature.
Right.
I think that would be the solution to that, the Euthyphro.
I think that just pushes it to another level. I could ask, are things good because they are consistent with his nature, like kindness or justice? Are they good because they align with his nature, or is his nature kind and just because those things are good? Like you get the same problem. You don't. It's just linguistic wordplay that doesn't solve the problem, I think.
About 2 minutes left.
Well, I mean, I think the way I see it is that what's right and wrong in each given situation would be actualized by the Holy Spirit. So God would make things right and wrong, and it's not going to be arbitrary because he has this like unchanging, eternal nature, and God is like the ultimate objective absolute. So whatever God says is like objective. And his choices, his actions are objective. So I don't really see that as being like arbitrary.
Well, I do see it as arbitrary. I think if you say that like God is good by definition, then to say that God is good becomes a meaningless tautology. What does that even mean to say that God is good? If good is whatever God is, you know?
I would say when we say God's good, we mean he has all the great making properties like omniscient, omnipotence, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, eternal, uncreated, absolute, all that.
What makes those properties good? Why were those properties good?
Why are they good? Because they're the great I don't know, that's because they're like the perfect attribute set. Like they're he has all the perfect attributes, like he has every attribute that's like would be considered a benefit to have, he has in a perfected form. And that's what we would mean when we say God's good.
But why would something be a benefit to have? Like on the basis of what is beneficial?
It's better to have like knowledge than to not have knowledge, right? So having omniscience would be a great making property.
Time. Are you done, or do you want to continue your statement?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So we'll be moving into the conclusions. For everybody in the audience, after the conclusions, we're going to have the audience Q&A. So on the YouTube, feel free to submit a super chat for the text questions. And then if you're in the audience, go ahead and raise your hand now to get in line. Last night we weren't able to get to everybody, so if you have questions for them, make sure to, raise your hand, right? Also, in the YouTube audience, feel free to join the Discord, discord.gg/politics. BS Lewis, please type the ! Discord real fast so that they can join and get in queue if they like. I just want to make sure we get to everybody. If we're short on questions, we'll open up another audience Q&A text thing for additional text questions, but normally we run out of time on it, so I'm just trying to make sure we get to everybody. With that being said, we've got 7-minute conclusions coming up. PMARS is going to be, he's the affirmative, so he'll be the first one, and then Modern is going to be the second conclusion, and he'll be closing it out as he's the negative. So PMARS, let me know when you're ready, and I'll go ahead and hit the timer.
I'm ready. Okay.
Perfect. You have 7 minutes now.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sticking with me through this debate. We've been talking about something big, not just fancy ideas, but the very foundation of how we know anything at all. And I've argued that the Christian God is necessary for knowledge. And as we wrap up, I want to point a clear picture on why this matters to you and me and everyday folks trying to make sense of the world. So quickly, maybe we should just go over the model of how Christians know things real quick to make that clear to everyone. God's the original knower. God knows everything. First of all, in and of himself, he is the one who planned, created, and controls the universe by his thoughts. When we know things, we therefore need to know the mind of God. Now we can do that either by him directly revealing himself. God can actually give us in human words what we should think about him, or directly through the world around and about us. The mind of God is revealed in the conceptual order, logical order, causal order, in ethical evaluations and aesthetic judgments. When we go out and experience the world empirically, Van Til says that we're learning about the mind of God. The world reflects how God has ordered things. I can learn about duckness because God knows the universal for ducks. He knows all the properties, how they're to be applied. God also knows the particular ducks because he creates them. So God knows all the particular details and the universals. And when I learn either details or universals by generalization, I'm reflecting God's mind. So life is like a story, right? We remember the stories. We all love stories, movies. They help us understand what's going on. Science is a story too about how the world works. But every story needs a beginning, context. And I said the Christian God is that beginning. He's not some far-off figure who just kicked things off and left. He's the author who wrote the script, directed every scene, and even stepped into the story himself, coming to Earth. So, what does this give us? A world we can count on. The Bible says God promises that day and night, seasons and harvest won't stop in Genesis 8:22. That's why we can trust the sun will rise tomorrow, gravity won't suddenly quit. We have minds built for truth. He made us in his image, so our brains aren't just firing off random thoughts. They're designed to figure out what's real. He gives us a reason to even care about truth. God tells us to seek truth and avoid lies. Well, that's why honesty matters, whether we're scientists or just chatting as friends. So without the Christian God, we're like someone who walks into a movie halfway through. You'll see what's happening, explosions, conversations, but you're lost because you've missed the start. And that's what I've been saying. He gives us the full story. Now, my opponent might argue a different God could do this, like a deist God who sets up the world and walks away. But think about, that's like a movie director who films the first scene and then disappears. What if the projector breaks? Who keeps the story going? A deist God doesn't talk to us, doesn't promise anything. There's no reason to trust the world, which would just fall apart tomorrow. That the world won't fall apart tomorrow. The Christian God, though, he sticks around and he's active and personal and he keeps things steady. Maybe you might think you don't need any God, that nature, the laws are enough. Well, we see patterns like the sun rises and we see apples falling. Why complicate it? Well, here's the catch. Why do those patterns stay the same? If there's no one behind them, it's like expecting your car to run forever without fuel or a mechanic. It doesn't make sense. The Christian God isn't just the starter. He's the one keeping the engine humming. And what about right and wrong? If truth is just something we humans make up, why not bend it when it's convenient? The Christian God says don't lie, and he's watching. That's why we care about getting things right, whether it's science experiments or a promise to a friend. So let's go back to the movie idea. So imagine walking into a theater halfway through a film. You see people running, fighting, laughing, but without the opening, you're clueless. That's life without the Christian God. We've got bits and pieces, stars in the sky, cells in our bodies, gravity pulls us down, but there's no context. With God, we get the whole plot. He's the opening scene that makes the rest click. So here's what it all boils down to. Knowledge isn't just a pile of facts. It's understanding the story behind those facts. Christian God is the author, the director, and even the star of that story. Without him, we're floating in a sea of information with no compass. With him, the world makes sense yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Let me leave you with this picture. Imagine trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle blindfolded with no clue of what it's supposed to look like. That's knowledge without the Christian God. Frustrating and messy. Now imagine having the box with the full picture right there. That's what he gives us. Clarity, purpose, a way to see how it all fits. So what are you going to pick? So thank you for listening and thinking this through with me. This isn't really just a debate. It is about the truth we all live by. So let's keep asking these questions and seeking the answers together.
Are you ceding the rest of your time?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for the conclusion, P. Mars. Let me know when you're ready, Modern, and I'll start your 7 minutes.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Perfect. You've got 7 minutes starting now.
So what is knowledge? Knowledge is defined as facts or information acquired through education or experience. That's in one dictionary, right? And how do we acquire knowledge? We can see that in the first instance, we acquire knowledge through our senses. It's through observation that creatures perceive the world and get information about its properties and its nature, which then becomes knowledge. Now, the question is, do we need to justify things such as the laws of logic, the uniformity of nature, make knowledge work? I think no. I think our knowledge, our empirical knowledge, it will work perfectly well, even if we didn't have these laws guiding our reasoning, because our knowledge has not been deduced using these laws necessarily. Now, this is not to say that a materialistic worldview cannot account for the laws of logic. I said that Kant has certain things called a priori truths, which are truths that are simply true by virtue of the definition of words. So a thing is identical to itself. It is a truth that comes naturally from the definition of identical. You don't need anything to ground it. And the idea that, okay, the laws of logic are a reflection of God's mind, this is what presuppositionalists usually say. I think this is word salad. I don't see how the statements are a reflection of something. What does that even mean? That are meant to reflect something, right? I mean, if they had said something else, they are manifestation of God's essence. I think it will be like the same. You know, which are true? Reflection of God's mind or manifestation of God's essence? I don't see any way to distinguish, to know this. So it's like, well, it's just one word salad they make, but what are the lacks of truth? It is also clear that God will be bound by this. God cannot make a contradiction to be true. That's not possible. He cannot make an object be not identical to itself. So his actions and his omnipotence is obviously limited by these laws. He's not the creator of it. Why will he be limited by a reflection of his own mind? You know, so that's not really a good argument. So yeah, some other things. Okay, how can you know that our senses are reliable? What I say is that it seems like they provide, on the first instance, they give us a coherent view of the world. Like the world makes sense. You can make predictions based on information you get from your senses, which later confirm it, right? And regarding like, okay, how do you know that you're not in the matrix and all your senses you are never perceiving reality, right? It also has this problem. You see, Descartes has a thought experiment called the evil demon. He says, imagine there is an evil demon of great power that is trapping me in an illusion and it's making me believe that way, which is not, right? How do you know that's not true? You cannot. No world you can really get rid of that problem, right? We are all on the same epistemological boat here. Last, on the reliability of your reasoning faculties, I think I show why the theist has a circular argument, because if I ask, how do you know your reasoning faculties are reliable? He has to say like, okay, God is good and it will make our reasoning faculties right? Correct. But this is a reasoning. This is a form. You have to reason this. So there is no way to escape this problem. You cannot say, oh, he's saying in the Bible that they are reliable, right? Because he could have lied. And if I ask, okay, how do you know God didn't lie? You have to say, oh, because he's good and he couldn't lie, right? So this is also a form of reasoning. I think there is no way to escape this problem, right? And last, I mentioned some other defeaters for knowledge, like, how do you know the devil is not making you believe false things? There is a Bible verse I forgot to bring up, 2 Chronicles chapter 18, verse 21 to 22. So now the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of these prophets. He's talking about how God sent proper spirit to deceive some other people. So even God can deceive you, even according to the Bible, right? So Christianity fails to account infallibly for knowledge. That's all.
So, man, thanks for taking the time to debate me, Modern Atheism.
Oh, thank you too.
And Taco, I know we had some trouble behind the scenes, but thanks for letting me debate and hosting.